Well, it's going to be a big speech from the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, this afternoon. She's in Washington, D.C. She's calling on the UN Refugee Convention, signed back in 1951, to be ripped up and rewritten for modern times.
Yes, the Refugee Council charity says the UK should be instead addressing the real issues in the asylum system, such as the record backlog and providing safe routes for those in need of protection, rather than tearing up agreements.
Well, the former Australian Foreign Minister, Alexander Downer, joins us now. No stranger to this programme. Alexander, welcome. Very good to talk to you again. What do you make of the Home Secretary's speech? She's going to be a lonely voice, I imagine, in calling for this convention to be ripped up or be rewritten, because it's not going to happen unless she gets dozens of other countries to go along with it.
Well, there has been discussion over the last few years about whether the Refugee Convention can be tightened up, and I think it will. True, it would be very difficult to get a consensus for that and to make the changes. But the problem that she alludes to is completely right, and that is that since 1951, the definition of a refugee has expanded very substantially. So anyone who comes from a country which is at civil war is defined as a refugee. A woman from a country where there is systemic discrimination against women for cultural reasons, such as in Iran, will automatically get refugee status. Or somebody who is gay, who comes from a country where homosexuality is illegal, gets refugee status. So if you add all of the people who could qualify, I mean, it comes to not much under 1 billion people in a world of what, 8 billion people. So the fact is that what was originally intended in 1951 has expanded enormously since. So I think there will be a lot of sympathy in the European Union, from Australia, the United States, possibly even Canada, for what Suella Braverman is saying. But whether it be possible to make those changes, it's hard to see it happening.
Alexander, people often say to the Home Secretary and say to the Conservative government, when they want to get tough on those crossing the Channel, they point to the fact that in previous years, 70-odd% of those who have sought asylum have been granted asylum. Do you think that might be because the definition of refugee is so broad, in Braverman's view?
Yes, definitely. I mean, the reason why it's so high in the UK, it's over 70% of applications are accepted in the UK. In the European Union, at least in the major European Union countries, the figure is much lower, somewhere in the vicinity, I think, of around 40 or 50%. So this gets to the whole debate about definition, which is a very good debate to have, of what a refugee is. Now, in the case of the UK, there is a statutory definition, but there are also the decisions that have been made by the courts. And a sort of a combination of the written law and judgments by court has led to an ever-expanding definition of a refugee. I mean, a refugee is supposed to be someone who is fleeing, an individual who is fleeing personal persecution. And secondly, it is not an application for asylum, and is not an application to become a migrant. It's an application for protection. So you don't have to be in the UK for the UK government to provide protection. There are all sorts of different ways countries can provide protection. But it's turned into a very broad definition of what is a refugee, and the UK accepting all these people as migrants to come and to live permanently in the UK. So the problem has just continued to multiply, and it's been gained very successfully by people smugglers.
She singled out as well, she said, in her view, it's not good enough just to say, I'm gay, therefore I can be a refugee. And if you think about our own Commonwealth, much loved by the late Queen, Alexander, at least 20 or 30 countries in the Commonwealth, it is still, you are criminalised if you engage in homosexual acts. So And that's been going under the noses of the British government for years and years, and we do nothing about it. So she's got a point, hasn't she, about saying, why should somebody who's gay claim, I'm entitled to have refugee status and live in Britain?
Well, and of course, it's not just Commonwealth countries. It's countries like Pakistan, Iran, and so on, where being gay is a criminal offence. Now, whether they actually go ahead and prosecute people in these countries is another question. But nevertheless, it has been seen as a basis for successfully claiming refugee status. But, I mean, I'm not sure that we need to get into this game, but how many people live in countries where being gay is an offence? There would be many. And then how many of those people are gay? Well, you know, people can do the maths. And you can't have all of these people migrating to the UK. There are other ways of addressing these issues. And these are cultural questions too. So they're very deeply held views in some sorts of societies about these kind of questions.
Alexander, can I just ask, how big a problem do you think it is asylum seekers claiming to be gay when they're not, or claiming to be Christian and not, and persecuted for religious reasons? Is this a big problem? Because lots of charities and NGOs are saying this is massively overstated and that Braverman shouldn't be picking on the LGBT community, for example.
Well, I mean, the LGBTQ plus community is part of the broader community, so we're allowed to talk about them. I wouldn't have thought it would be possible to get data on this. I mean, you wouldn't know how many of the claims were sincere and how many of them were false, because by definition, those people who have been given refugee status, their stories have been accepted. Well, I mean, it's very difficult, isn't it, for an immigration officer or border force officer to establish whether someone's gay or not. I mean, it used to be quite easy to establish whether they were women, but that seems to be more of a subject of debate as well these days.
Good one. That's a good one.
Very
Particularly when the interviews are being cut from 7 hours to 45 minutes. I mean, impossible to tell whether someone's claim is genuine or not.
That's
Alexander. No, I mean, this is a huge issue, huge issue.
It really is. Alexander, thanks so much for joining us. That's the former Australian Foreign Minister, Alexander Downer. Always good to talk to him.